Hello and welcome to the radiotimes.com Doctor Who podcast. My name's Hugh Fullerton, and this week I'm joined once more by extra special guest panelist Rob Lean, radiotimes.com's gaming editor. Hello, Rob.
Hello, Hugh. How's it going?
It's going well. Thanks for joining us again. This week Rob's joining us for a very special occasion. Last week we were celebrating the birthday of Peter Davison, aka the Fifth Doctor. And this week we're celebrating the birthday of his son-in-law. And that isn't just a random choice. We're not that granular anymore, because his son-in-law is the 10th Doctor, David Tennant, who had a similar milestone birthday. He turned 50 a few days ago, well, a few days before this podcast was recorded. So obviously for Peter Davison's 70th birthday, me and Morgan took a look back on the Fifth Doctor's kind of legacy and where he kind of lies in the story, things like that. This week, though, we're going to do something a bit different for David Tennant, because we kind of did all that when the 10th Doctor won our Best Doctor poll last year. We already took a look back at the legacy and importance of the character. So I was kind of thinking, what can we do for this? How can we mark this special occasion? And I thought, what about the future rather than the past? Because that's very Doctor Who-y. So we're going to look at David Tennant's future in Doctor Who, which might sound a bit strange, but Rob, there's one thing coming out which has David Tennant in, which we should talk about, because David Tennant's going to be in a new Doctor Who game, isn't he?
He is indeed. It's called Doctor Who: The Edge of Reality, and it comes to us from Maze Theory, the same British company who made the Edge of Time VR game last year and produced the Lonely Assassins mobile game very recently. So yeah, they're kind of the custodians of Doctor Who in the gaming world. That's kind of how it seems from outside, anyway. And yeah, they've got David Tennant in for one, which is very, very exciting.
So I played the Edge of Time back in 2019, whenever it was. They brought me in. Maze Theory brought me into their office, and I had a go. I was being chased by weeping angels and stuff. It was very fun, although quite scary. So is this a sequel to that game, or is it like kind of like a reskin or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I actually asked Ian Hambleton, who's kind of producer on all these games, when I was interviewing him recently about Lonely Assassins. And he was saying that, let me find the relevant section. He was saying that Edge of Reality does have a lot of the material from Edge of Time. Probably the first half of the new game is a lot of that stuff, albeit with expanded levels and gameplay and stuff. And what they've done with Edge of Reality is we've introduced other baddies like the Cybermen that you've seen, whole new levels and layers that make it much more, and David Tennant. So it kind of sounds like it starts with some bits that might be familiar if you played Edge of Time, but kind of goes off in some new directions and adds a lot of extra stuff. Obviously, David Tennant being the particularly exciting bit.
Yeah, that is quite crazy. I mean, on a side note, it's not a VR game anymore, is it? It's just a game.
Yeah, so this one's going to be on all kind of consoles and all kind of PCs, basically. Because apparently that was the main piece of feedback they got on Edge of Time, other than people saying that they liked it, was people asking, can you bring it out on consoles so everyone can play it, so it's not kind of behind the quite pricey paywall that kind of is having to own a VR headset. Kind of limits a lot of people from being able to play something. So yeah, this will go a lot wider, which is cool.
Yeah, that's why I had to go into their office to play, because I don't have a VR headset. I thought you were going to say that a lot of the feedback they got was like, why isn't David Tennant in it? Which, to be honest, that is a thing that a lot of people have asked about the main series for a while. So, who could blame them? I'm quite interested in this because obviously David Tennant's done kind of Doctor Who voice stuff for ages. He's done loads of Big Finish, which we'll talk about in a minute, and a few other bits and bobs too. So it's kind of interesting to have him kind of come back and play the character in a game, which also seems like, from the very brief clip we've seen, it's kind of like a crossover with Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, who was in Edge of Time and is also in this. I think we saw, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like I've seen a clip of like a door opening and you see the 10th Doctor kind of standing in silhouette. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. That's I think so far that's the only trailer we've had for Edge of Reality. Which, yeah, you're right, kind of is going to have both of them in it. So yeah, Jodie Whittaker was in Edge of Time mainly as a voice. Obviously, well, it's a video game, so it's everyone's a voice. You're not live action person if you're in a game. But yeah, I think she was mainly like the voice in the ear of the player, kind of helping you through puzzles and telling you how to use the sonic screwdriver and things like that. So yeah, it was interesting in that trailer because it seems that David Tennant might be in it a bit more than that actually made like a full video game version of him that's there as a kind of character who's actually kind of stood in front of you rather than just kind of being in your ear, which is interesting. And yeah, he says the now famous Paul McGann line of "I'm the Doctor," but maybe not the one that you were expecting.
Yeah, which is a great way of doing that. I mean, it kind of reminds me, there's a line in Futurama, which I'll paraphrase slightly, where it's like, it seems like the 10th Doctor will lurk in shadows and in out of focus areas. Because like part of the reason I think that they didn't have Jodie Whittaker in person in Edge of Time is because it's quite difficult to do kind of photorealistic people in VR. Compared to like obviously fairly photorealistic backgrounds and enemies like the Cybermen and the Daleks and stuff, you know, they look pretty good because they're you know, a design. Whereas like if it's like a person, it kind of looks a bit wrong and it kind of kicks you out a bit. Like the Weeping Angels as well, I think kind of work in it because again, you don't see a single person in Edge of Time. It's just like monsters and the odd like painting, I think, and then everything else is like, yeah, just voice recordings. You're constantly setting off little records and stuff. But anyway, yeah, no, I do think it's quite interesting. The Paul McGann line's a good callback because it kind of feels like this is David Tennant's biggest comeback in a while. Because, like, I mean, obviously it's not quite comparable to Paul McGann coming back to star in a little episode, but it does seem like this is kind of a Doctor Who story that David Tennant's going to be in, where people are going to see the Doctor. He's possibly going to cross over with Jodie Whittaker, so it's technically a kind of multi-Doctor story, which is pretty cool. But it also kind of comes at the culmination of a continued involvement he's had with the kind of spin-off media, which has really sprung up over the last couple of years. Like he started doing Big Finish with Billy Piper a few years ago. No, Catherine Tate he started off with a few years ago. Then I think he did some with Billy Piper. And now it's kind of like, especially in lockdown, it seems like he's been doing quite a lot of Doctor Who stuff. He's done like, you know, 10th Doctor and River Song Adventures. He's done more 10th Doctor stories. He's done like spin-offs, did like basically a load of Big Finish stuff tying into Time Lord Victorious when that was a thing. I mean, still a thing, I think. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be interesting to see how they do it because Jodie Whittaker is definitely in it as well. But I'd love to know if they're actually going to have scenes together or whether they kind of a ships in the night kind of thing. It'll be interesting to see.
Definitely. I mean, I'd say the current production team has somewhat modeled Jodie's Doctor on David Tennant's Doctor in terms of like, you know, the sort of upbeat kind of young, fairly kind of, they're trying to kind of hit a mainstream audience again. Like they've directly referenced it a few times, like at the end of The Timeless Children, the whole thing where she goes, what is a specifically David Tennant's Doctor thing. Like no other Doctor has done that as far as I know. So, you know, they kind of have occasionally tried to sort of, I think, tie those two Doctors together before, and there are a lot of similarities between them. You know, they're the only two Doctor Who Build-A-Bears, as far as I know. You know, which is, I think actually they might have done a Matt Smith one now, but it was mainly those two to start off with. So yeah, it will be kind of interesting to see them interact. That said, I'm kind of like, will they be allowed to make them interact in the game like that? I mean, maybe they will, but it kind of feels like, I don't know, it kind of feels like the thing the BBC might be like, well, no, we want to save that for something we'd do, if that makes sense. Like maybe if I would like be like you said, like ships passing in the night, like Jodie Whittaker would be like, oh, I just need to leave I just got to go off call for a second, walk down fake stairs into the cellar. Then walks up, oh, I just missed the Doctor. What happened there? Oh well, I could see it happening like that. I don't know why they need to do fake going down to the cellar though, because they're different people. Like anyway, I mean they're sort of the same person. Anyway. Like I said, obviously, Edge of Reality, obviously part of the reason we've got Rob on stage to talk about that, but it's not the only Doctor Who thing in David Tennant's Doctor Who future. As we've said, he continues to be in Big Finish things. So there's loads of those coming up, you know, Diaries of River Song kind of stuff. And we usually have an obligatory Big Finish mention on this podcast. Obviously, this is quite a long one. But yeah, it's been quite interesting to hear him kind of return to the world of Big Finish. I think because his Doctor still feels so like, I don't know, to me anyway, modern, even though he like left over 10 years ago, it's still quite cool to see. Like I'm looking at his sort of Big Finish portfolio, and it's like he's got a new thing coming up where he's going to face the Dalek Universe, or it's already been out some of it. He's in a Torchwood audio now, which is pretty cool. It's the first Torchwood Doctor Who crossover. Although I'm not sure if it's going to be him, like it is David Tennant, but I'm not sure if it's going to be him or if it's going to be like the parallel universe David Tennant, or like a person pretending to be that Doctor. We've got him teaming up with the Fifth Doctor, funnily enough, in Out of Time. Like I said, he was in Time Lord Victorious. He's doing the River Song thing, which I already mentioned. I'm literally just scrolling through the list of stuff here. And I think he did something with Tom Baker, and the 10th Doctor Adventures with some classic companions is coming. Basically, he's just doing a lot. And it's kind of cool that like his Doctor, who was such a big part of the series and such a big part of the series' success, kind of gets to continue in that way. But I think what the fans would want to know, and what we should probably touch on here, is do we think David Tennant would ever return to the main series? I mean, Rob, what are your thoughts?
I would love it if he did. And yeah, I think part of the reason why it feels like he kind of never left, or is still kind of very recent part of the tapestry, is because of the 50th as well, isn't it? Which kind of proves that he's kind of game for a return, or at least he was then. And yeah, I'd love to see him come back again. And I suppose it's another one of those things that with the 60th now looming, was it a couple of years away or a year and a bit away, makes me hopeful that maybe something could happen then. But what do you think?
I don't know. Like I'm really hopeful that they do something interesting for the 60th, and I think a multi-Doctor special would be great. It's 2023, I think it would be. So I guess my slight caveat is that a 50th anniversary is a very big deal. A 60th anniversary is like a big deal, but it's not quite the same thing. If you know what I mean, it's not like a half century. Like it's kind of, you can kind of choose whether to make a big deal of it or not, because the next big one is 75th, which we're a little way off. So might have to see how we go with that. I'm interested to see whether A, they do something, and B, whether he'd come back. Like I said, he's sort of, unlike a lot of other Doctors, I'd say, compared to Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi, he has probably left less, if that makes sense. Like definitely he had a few years where he was pretty separate from it. I think it's more in more recent years that he's kind of slightly slipped back into it. Similar to, I mean, Christopher Eccleston obviously was kind of an abrupt, it seemed from the outside anyway. He's recently done a video for Big Finish where he said, that's your opinion, when someone said, you were quite distant from the role for a while. But Christopher Eccleston seemingly was quite, like, he didn't really want to talk about Doctor Who and stuff for a long time. And now obviously he's coming back to it again. David Tennant had not quite that extreme, but he did have a few years afterwards where he was like doing very different roles and kind of doing stuff. And he is still doing those very different roles, but he is also kind of on the sly, on the side, very much part of Doctor Who. And you kind of feel like there's a bit of that that's down to him being such a fan. Obviously, he was in Big Finish before he was the Doctor in a very small role. He's loved Doctor Who for a very, very long time. Obviously, other Doctors have been like that as well. Like Peter Capaldi was a fan when he was younger. But you feel like Peter Capaldi, while a very good classic fan of the series, maybe had, and I haven't done this, so I think it's fine for me to say, I think maybe he grew out of it a bit in the years in between before coming back to the series. And Matt Smith, you feel like, obviously, while enjoying the show and being a great Doctor, kind of was able to kind of move on a bit. Although he has occasionally popped back to do interviews, like they did something for the launch of the series on BritBox. So anyway, my point is, it feels like in recent years, David Tennant has kind of been doing more Doctor Who spin-off stuff more regularly, kind of just as a default, which makes me feel like if they were like, "Oh, come back and play him on screen," he's going to be like, he maybe wouldn't mind, because he's kind of been in that world again. And then you look also at Christopher Eccleston and you think maybe he'd feel the same way. Before, he was like, it was a big jump to go from not playing the Doctor, not talking about the Doctor, to suddenly being on screen as the Doctor again. But maybe now, having played the Doctor again, with his voice, he might think, oh, you know what? Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if the script's good enough. I mean, he has said it will be when hell freezes over, but in Doctor Who terms, it's possible. So yeah, basically, that's my very long-winded answer, saying I don't know, but I do think it's possible. I would like to see it. I think I would say, like, as a slightly crucial point, I don't think David Tennant has really aged since he was in his mid-30s. So he will basically, if he does crop up again in the main series, look pretty much the exact same. He'd have to shave off his new beard and his long hair, but or explain that in universe as something the 10th Doctor's been up to. But I think it's certainly plausible. Like, I think that David Tennant's Doctor Who story could have ended in 2010, but it didn't, and I kind of think that it's going to continue forward.
Yeah, same. Couple of thoughts. One, if he does come back again, I hope that they find his pot of hair gel this time, because it was a bit weird in the 50th that he suddenly didn't have the big quiff anymore.
Yeah. Also, on a related note, someone needs to iron his suit because it looked really weird in the 50th. It was like, I don't know where they stored it or what they did to it, but it was kind of really like wrinkly and sort of looked really cheap. Maybe it was just they use better cameras now. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. And I keep thinking as well about that Russell T Davies quote from a few weeks or months ago when what was it called? His drama recently.
It's a Sin.
I was embarrassing. Yeah, it reminds me of that kind of quote he gave about Doctor Who at the time of that coming out, when he was saying about how wasn't it a bit ahead of its time, how it kind of had these shared universe spin-off things kind of before it was cool. And one of the things that he kind of listed as things that should be happening in like a dream world would be the 10th and 11th Doctors kind of teaming up for a mini series or something like that. And like, I think that's an interesting idea, because it's like, forever it's kind of seemed like Doctor Who, the main show, is its own kind of one thing, and then there's kind of if Doctors are going to show up in other things, like it's very much kind of branded as like a spin-off, like a game or a Big Finish or something like that. But I would like to kind of see them try that at some point, like the idea of we're going to do like a Doctor Who event series, which isn't necessarily like, you could put another subtitle on it, like when they did Torchwood Children of Earth and stuff like that, like Doctor Who 10 and 11 time.
that classic phrase and idiom we're also familiar with. Yeah. Doctor Who, turn it up to 11. But yeah, no, I think that's quite a good idea. Like, to be honest, a part of me would love to see that. I think we obviously kind of think of the multi-Doctors stories as like very much this kind of like usually anniversary sort of themed thing that like only come every so often, probably because they're quite difficult to do. But I am kind of like, there's no reason you couldn't do a multi-Doctor miniseries. It's only because it hasn't been done that we don't do it. And I think that'd be awesome, I mean, they kind of do it on Big Finish. They kind of have these multi-episode arcs where different Doctors team up, and they're very popular. So I'm kind of like, why not? If people are up for it and people are free and it doesn't interfere with the main show, to be honest, it would be the best way of doing, Doctor-y spin-offs that don't interfere with the main show, is have previous older Doctors teaming up and doing stuff. I mean, it's kind of what the ethos was behind Time Lord Victorious. I think they had the 8th, 9th and 10th Doctors, because those are ones people like to see, and it was fun to see them interact when they don't interact that much in various media. So yeah, I mean, again, look, we should say all of this is speculation. We have no reason to suspect David Tennant has any particular plans to return to the main series. He may have been asked and told them no. You never know. It might be quite different, popping along to a recording studio / cracking open the podcast mic at home versus, trawling yourself down to South Wales, leaving your wife and kids behind to pretend to be an alien with an estuary English accent. It just might not be something he wants to do. But I do still stand by the fact that I think David Tennant's kind of Doctor Who future, which is the slightly laboured theme of this week's podcast, is still looking bright. I still think he is going to be a part of the series for a long time to come. He's definitely like an ambassador in the way that a lot of the classic Doctors are, where you kind of don't stop being Doctor Who. You don't stop being the Doctor. You just keep, even if you don't play him, you're always him. So you might as well play him and get paid for it. But what do you think, listeners? Would you like to see David Tennant return to Doctor Who? I wonder. Always, he's no one's ever asking for the 10th Doctor to come back. But, do you think it's likely that David Tennant will be back in the main series in the future? Or do you think he should stick with Big Finish and spin-off media like the games? You can check out loads of Doctor Who content on radiotimes.com. We've got the latest on Christopher Eccleston's Doctor Who Big Finish audios, which we've mentioned here, and some quotes from John Bishop about BBC secrecy about the new series, because he got in a bit of trouble, and loads of other stuff. And obviously you can check out our stable of former podcasts, if that's the way of expressing that, on the radiotimes.com YouTube channel, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Acast, things like that. Until next time, I've been Hugh.
And I've been Rob.
And this has been us saying goodbye for this edition of the podcast. Goodbye.